Recording in progress.
Thank you. Let me make sure we're not muted we're not muted, right? So, just to throw you off, we're not going to go in order of the program. For the small groups, I'm going to jump around because that's what I'm going to do. Mitch, I think you want to present first, right? Vanna and Pat Sajak are coming down. So I will leave that to you. Thank you. There's a
We are ready to go. Hi, everyone. So we're going to be discussing quality improvement patient safety training. Like any good academic, I'm going to make a disclaimer that this is not my area of expertise. So if you ask me a hard question, I'm going to defer to Mitch. He's just here to make sure that I do a good job. Let's see. How do we get to the next slide? Okay, so we'll start with our aspirations, and that didn't come up on the screen, so I don't know what we're doing wrong here. Hold on. Why are we?
Next one. It's showing you.
Yeah, but it's not showing on the. We have to change something.
Oh,
We're seeing your
crumb cake.
crumb cakes. Maybe.
Sorry, let me.
Okay.
Share.
I'm also not an IT expert. There we go. So no, it was the other one.
Why is that? Do that. Is it up there twice? Is that what's going on?
Right there. Perfect.
Oh.
Close enough. Nope, that didn't work either.
No.
All right.
What if we turn that?
Maybe.
That's so weird.
We appreciate your patience.
Oh yeah, because it's that. Let me just see if we can just. It's gonna embed them and one didn't.
Mhm. What if we go to back? Lectern PC. Did I just ruin the whole thing? All right. No, that didn't work. Oh, that's not ours.
Unless that's yours.
It's not.
Oh, just when I thought we were.
There's
all
more
set.
desserts. But
Yeah.
Um,
I promise you it's a wonderful presentation.
that is wonderful. Yeah.
so weird.
Yeah, I don't know.
I closed it. Close it.
It's a good slide. Though.
Oh, you know what? We're not even on slideshow. Oh, I see. All right.
Maybe. That's
We're getting there. We're getting there. And put this on slideshow. That's what we need.
Got it. Got it.
Ooh,
That was the
there we
issue.
go.
We weren't on slideshow.
I knew there was a.
Oh, and we gotta share again. Where's my?
Oh, right. So I'm breaking my first rule of presentation, which is to never put all of your bullet points on the screen at the same time. But we did that anyway. So in terms of our aspirations related to quality improvement and patient safety, we talked about the idea of faculty, that's supposed to be targeted, faculty targeted training that works for faculty, and resident fellow targeted training that works for everyone. I think that's a relatively good aspiration. We discussed the idea of recruiting the people who are engaged with quality improvement and patient safety. And for those who might not be engaged, we asked the question, well, how do we create that? I left this quote in here because I was told that it would resonate with many of you, but this idea of how do we get ourselves out of the drain? So I'm hoping that you are able to interpret that. We mentioned the idea also of defining the mission. Maybe we need to define the mission of what quality improvement looks like or should look like. And as a sub point there, we discussed faculty competency in quality improvement having a place of priority. And I think that that's important. We have to prioritize if we are going to get that buy-in and that engagement. And then, of course, providing the necessary resources for it to be a priority. We talked about promoting a culture of improvement. And then I italicized this because I liked this idea, but that, and this really is one of the outcomes, our results as well, but really that every resident or fellow that leaves our institution should know how to do a QI project or speak the language of the methodology as well. And then we discussed interdisciplinary training and or crosstalk, because we discussed the idea that like everyone is doing this stuff, but it's often very siloed. So we don't have that, those connections, those conversations. So those were our aspirations. In terms of our strengths, unfortunately, our strengths slide wasn't as large as some of the other slides, but we have a clinical partner that is a quality. Oh, it didn't advance. Why is this? Sheesh. Do I have to go back to? Let's see this.
Still doesn't look like it's the slideshow.
Let's see what happens. It won't even go to a slideshow.
See what's here. You shrink this.
Shrink it. This one.
And you pick.
But that doesn't come up either. I don't know. I don't know.
What is that?
I don't know.
Weird.
Wait, what if I use this? Whoa. Mitch, why did we volunteer to go first? Okay, so let's see if we can get to step. Let's see if it works. Okay, good. All right, we're there. We're just making it easier for whoever's going next, that's all. So in terms of our strengths, you'll see that we have a clinical partner, which is a quality-focused institution. We think that that's important. We have existing GME resources for quality improvement and patient safety. To my left. And there was an anonymous quote, we didn't want to, but someone suggested we're pretty damn good compared to other places, which I think is an important measure, important metric to include. And we have a division of health system science that includes quality improvement and patient safety as core domains, and forming an academic home for those areas. And it's large and it's well-funded, et cetera. So those are our strengths. Those are some things that are done well. The opportunity slide was dense. We had to shrink the font a bit. But some of the opportunities that we discussed included using the educational opportunities that we have to support faculty development, of course. And then we had our questions, like how do we incentivize? How do we recruit? How do we support those individuals? And then, of course, there's always the question of protected time. So how do we protect time and space for that type of training? Actually, most of our things here are questions. How do we balance the clinical mission with the educational mission? I don't know that there's necessarily an answer to that, but something we're thinking about. There is definitely a disconnect between training and application. My only contribution to this really was the idea of the inert knowledge problem. But we don't need to get into educational theory. But anyway, we discussed also the notion of goal setting beforehand. And thinking in terms of our outcomes, where do we need to be? And you'll see when we get to our results, being proactive instead of reactive with our quality improvement training and our projects. Then we mentioned the idea you'll see here shared many times, shared curriculum, shared data, shared ideas, shared repository, so that, you know, when some individuals are conceptualizing a project, that they may have access to data that exists that they might not know about, or they might say, has anyone done a project similar to this in the past? How can we find that? Well, if we have a shared repository, that might make it a bit easier. And then one of our learners actually suggested the idea of prepping the learners for quality improvement training. So not just I'm showing up because I need to be trained, but I've thought about what is it that I want to do with quality improvement? What is a project that I could undertake with this, and show up with those ideas in mind, because that facilitates that buy-in. And then finally, in terms of our results, what do we want? You know, what can we do What are the metrics? I mean, broadly, we want our systems to work better because good QI training results in good QI projects and so on and so forth down the line. We talked about developing a network of trained individuals so that they can communicate. We know who these individuals are. We set the goal, or we'd like to set the goal, I guess, of all of our trainees having at least intermediate level competency in QI methodology. And I mentioned this previously, better planning and less reactive QI projects, improved project development, mentorship, that type of thing. Improved QI training and project completion percentile. That's a metric that would be relatively easy to evaluate. I think we could find the data on that relatively easily. Collective, and this was, I suggested this, but the idea of collectively sharing our trainee-driven QI projects. So I know that in some areas there are some programs, there are ways to share those, but what about if we did this on a larger forum and sort of celebrated quality improvement projects? I put a little trophy there. So not everyone gets a trophy, I guess, but maybe we could have forums or, or a conference to do that, and we could provide some sort of award. People like to get awards. It makes them feel good, I think. And then, of course, support. So protected time for faculty and trainees. So that's what we came up with. I'm going to step back now and allow Mitch to respond to the questions. Yes.
We did. Hold it.
Why didn't it start?
Good question. We're ready to restart.
Okay, good. Those are fun.
Yeah, they were fun. You brought good projects.
So I think I remember Mitch saying at one of the GMEC meetings that our QI, like the white, yellow, green belt, aren't necessarily transportable to other institutions. Is that still the case? And are things moving in that direction so that QI things can be more consistent for learners who might be leaving us?
Yeah, I think probably what I said, John, and because this question comes up a lot, is that the belt levels that the institution uses don't, I don't want to burst any bubbles, but they don't really mean anything outside of just what UMass Memorial Health has decided that they mean. I have a friend, a neighbor of mine actually, who works at Bose, the electronics, and she's a lean trainer there. And so we talk about lean and A3s and stuff, and it's the same. But what it takes to be a green belt at Bose is very different from what it takes relative to what it takes to be a green belt here. I'd say that the skills, we absolutely want them to be transportable, but like the belt, it's not like you're going to show up at Mass General or Temple or UCLA or something and say, I have a green belt in lean, and they're going to be like, whoa, that's amazing. But once you show them what you can do with it, then I think they will think it's amazing.
All right.
Understanding what's happening here at UMass, but nationally, is there a mechanism for getting that certification or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question that's probably beyond the scope of what we'd be able to get into today. But healthcare quality improvement obviously is a huge movement. But if you look at what the UMass Memorial sort of brand of it, which is an interpretation of lean, you go down the road to IHI, and they use the IHI model for improvement. It has some similarities to lean, but it has some real differences too. So I think everybody's, as we all know, is into improvement and making things as good as they can be, as good as they should be. But in terms of a standardization of QI methodology that everybody would adopt, I think like a lot of clinical things, it takes a long time for the evidence to build to say, this is the way we should all be doing it. A brief answer, but I know you want more information.
Thanks. And I know there's probably a lot of questions, but we have lots of small group work to get through. So I'm going to move forward and we'll come back to kind of themed questions at the end. Thank you both. Thank you for going first. Thank you for a delightful presentation. Oh, we'll see. We'll see. All right. Beth, would you like to go next? Then I don't have to fight with the technology as quickly.
I don't have any PowerPoints, so no delays, not being able to pull them up. How's that? All right. So we were doing DEI and diversity And our aspirations were that our trainees and faculty will reflect the population of patients we serve. Retention rates will be equitable across all groups, and that we will have a robust pipeline of programs to interest diverse groups of high school and college students, and maybe even younger, to go into medicine. And that our aspiration is to have the resources to do all those things. The strengths are that we have a very good DEI office within the institution, and also many of the departments have excellent DEI personnel and divisions within their departments. And that in much of the time, those people that work in those positions are very responsive when someone reaches out for assistance. We are situated in a very diverse community of Worcester, and then for me in Fitchburg and Leominster. And that the breadth and size of our institutions, meaning both UMass Chan and UMass Memorial Health, offer a myriad number of opportunities and at many different levels for people to be involved in this. Our opportunities, we had a lot of those. We were thinking it would be good to better integrate all of the DEI and health equity processes and goals more completely, the efforts more completely, and to be more accessible to everyone. And to develop one specific goal was to develop like a starter kit. So if a rank and file faculty is appointed or volunteers to be the DEIO representative for their division or their office, that to give them sort of a kit of how to get started on this work and what to do and how to further these causes. Also to improve the DEI training of staff, nursing staff and other staff, and increase the diversity of staff, because sometimes our diverse residents come up at a hard stop with a nurse or other staff member who doesn't recognize the value of the diversity. To do all of these things, we need more resources, as always. To do anything, you need more resources predominantly of time. So that would mean clinical offsets or whatever, more personnel to get the clinical work done. Also, one of the opportunities is to put more resources into the pipeline processes to bring more diverse people to be interested in medicine. And also to recruit more faculty and residents to do this work. So in terms of results, the SMARTY goals, we didn't really get to that, but a lot of these opportunities sort of lend themselves to obvious SMARTY goals. So if we want our faculty and our residents to reflect the diversity of the population we serve, just need to get what is the population we serve and decide what categories you're going to try to reflect, which may be more difficult than it is on the surface. But to the extent that you try to do that, then you measure those other groups, the resident and the faculty groups, to see how you're doing, and you can measure it over time to see if we're making progress. The training in DEI of staff, I think we've made some steps in terms of the standards of respect that the clinical system is promoting, but we agreed that there could be more steps towards training the entire staff as opposed to just GME types, like, and that's what this meeting is, but beyond just us, because it's hard for us to do this work if we don't have the support of the entire institution. And then in terms of pipeline development, there are a lot of individual programs for pipeline development. But a SMARTY goal would be to bring those individual programs together to share ideas, but also to have synergies and to measure the success of those programs so that you can eliminate programs that have not been successful and promote the ones that have. I think I'll ask my group. Is there anything that I did not include? Got it all? All right. Any questions?
There's lots. We'll keep moving for now and we'll come back around. Could the learner assessment group present next? I don't know if Kathy, if you're gonna present or if somebody's gonna present from your group. I have the slides. They're even projecting. I think. And advancing. Woohoo.
All right, so we talked about for our aspirations, so the goal is the 75% compliance rate and 75% on-time compliance rate. We talked a bit about more positive evaluations and not so much just we only want to hear the good stuff. We want to be able to start seeing a change in the evaluations that the faculty or the residents are listening to the evaluative feedback, so they're getting better. So we're getting more positive evaluations because we're seeing that change over time. Milestones more in line with a competency-based practice. The biggest thing was faculty and trainee development in the areas of evaluations, milestones, and feedback. What does it mean to be an evaluator and assessing the progress of a trainee? And then institutional incentive to highlight the great work that people are doing clinically or educationally. More in-person feedback and more use of the mobile app. How do I move the slides forward? Where's the mouse? There it is. There we go. All right. Oh, there we go. So we talked about the strengths of our institution already. We felt that there's a strong culture around giving feedback and that both ways, resident to faculty, faculty to resident, and that no one is afraid to give that feedback to each other. Treating trainees with respect, strong standard with providing feedback, having an ingrown culture of giving feedback going all ways. There is a development of resident as an educator throughout their training. Resident feedback has improved curriculum and rotations, which creates very few barriers to improvements. So getting that feedback from residents on what they're learning, what their education process is like has given programs the opportunity to improve their curriculum and cater it more towards what the residents are looking for. Having such a good culture that ends up with trainees staying on as fellows or attendings and faculty. One of the people at my table mentioned that when they're doing evaluations on a trainee, they're looking at it as, I want you to be my colleague someday. So I want to evaluate you to get you to that point. And then again, making things adaptable. We're not just always stuck with the same curriculum that's been in place since the 70s. We're able, because of the feedback that's going in all the different directions, programs are able to adapt and change and move forward because all learners learn a little bit differently. So you can cater things a little bit better. So the opportunities that we see obviously in faculty development when it comes to evaluations, feedback, and milestones. A common theme was, evaluation fatigue. So there's a lot of evaluations and there's a lot of questions on evaluations. So that gives us the opportunity to educate the faculty on how does our program evaluate? How do we apply the milestones within our evaluations? How do we like to give feedback? What's the best way to word your feedback? Those kinds of things. So that's definitely an opportunity. And I think all programs can agree that most faculty don't quite understand milestones. Unless you're in leadership, unless you're in it, unless you're a program director, an APD, coordinator, milestones mean to you most of the time. So I think that's an amazing opportunity right there for within the program and as a GME as a whole. You can do your education within your own program on your milestones specifically, but we do have this opportunity to be able to educate GME as a whole institution, trainees, faculty, APDs, maybe even nurses if they do, you know, evaluations within your program. What are milestones? What do they mean at each level? How should a PGY 1 be presenting on the milestones versus, you know, a PGY 6 or something like that? Another opportunity is reassessing evaluations. You know, we've been on MedHub since 2017. Some programs have had the same evaluations since 2017. Do we need to refresh those? Do we need to, now that we have, most programs should have already because you got milestones 2.0, but should we be looking at it? Do we need to determine who gets evaluations, who is evaluating faculty, residents, rotations, et cetera, and on what frequency are we doing this? Are the evaluations too long? So really, you know, at one point during the year, take a step back, look at all your evaluations so far. Are we getting the data that we need? How can we fix it to make it better? More transparency with the trainees on the evaluation process. So, you know, trainees just, oh, we get evaluated. Yep. Okay. When you come in as a PGY 1, you don't know what the milestones are. You don't know the whole reasoning behind them and how it works and why as a PGY 1, you're not going to be getting 5s on anything. Are the programs doing anything to educate the trainees on your own internal process? And then GME as a whole, what can we do? There's an opportunity there to educate as well to get everybody on the same page. Improve the fluency and the tools that we do use. You know, we have MedHub, the ACGME guidebooks and all that. We have a lot of sources available to us, but is everybody aware of them? And is everybody able to take advantage of those? And then a program orientation for trainees. We do one at the GME level, and then there's an opportunity for each program to do that with orientation, again, as far as evaluations and stuff like that. So that's something that we can develop, you know, broadly that can be customized for the programs individually. Our results, so like we said, one of the results that we want is a higher completion rate. How are we going to do that? You can just say, do your evaluations, do your evaluations, do your evaluations all day long. We know that goes nowhere. Like I said before, you know, maybe review your delivery method, delivery timing. There's a bajillion different ways to deliver, assign evaluations. So look at the different ways that you can use the tools that we have and maybe cater it better to how your program works. Maybe you have to change that every year, depending on, you know, what kind of faculty you have, what kind of trainees you have. Review who gets assigned evaluations. Does every single faculty member need to evaluate every single trainee, or should you have just a core group of evaluators? Do we need a faculty incentive to make sure that they're doing their job? That's something to think about within the department. Protective administrative time for trainees to complete their evaluations. That's something that can be done. Faculty and training development. Reed does a lot of really good presentations on resident as an educator, faculty development as far as milestones, those kinds of things. He can talk like all the science behind education and all that stuff. I can tell you about how to operationalize it in MedHub and get the, you know, you're collecting all this great data. What do you do with it? So between the two of us, we're pretty good resources for your faculty and training development. You also need your department and your chair buy-in. If you want to make changes as far as, you know, mandating faculty, you have to do X, Y, Z. You really need that department and chair buy-in and kind of shift that culture. We find that if it comes from the top down, this is what you have to do. This is what you're charged with. We see a lot more results that way. Again, faculty incentives, and there is the ACGME guidebooks. There's tons of really great faculty resources, not just program director or trainee, but faculty resources on explaining the milestones and how to evaluate properly. We can also get a centralized CCC review committee all on the same page. So that way everyone's getting a clear explanation from the ACGME for each milestone. Something kind of centralized that's, you know, this is what a 1 is. This is what a 2 is on that scale. Instead of, you know, oh, this person was really great this day, they're a 5. That's not quite how that works. So getting that education kind of broad for everybody. And that's what we got. If anybody has anything to add. Or any questions? Thank you.
Okay, let me see. Who wants to go next? Who wants to go next? Well, don't all come banging down here. Okay, Sherry.
Yeah, that looks like me. Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Sherry Waldo and I work in the GME office and I worked with our red group. So we had a program accreditation and assessment. So thanks to my great team for all their feedback and input. A lot of what we talked about is actually similar to what Cassidy's group presented. The first of them is in regards to the MedHub evaluations and really the aspiration of them being more user-friendly for both the faculty as well as the learners, providing more meaningful information, meeting the institution's compliancy of 75%. Whoops, I put that, and just making them appropriately time and fit for our purpose. We also talked about how the GME and the program needs, the demands can overlap. So really looking at if there's any opportunities to stagger out throughout the year when things are due so that you're not just feeling that overwhelming time crunch all at once. And then our last aspiration is really, it was mentioned about some issues. If you're linking into the clinical systems, it's a separate login for the medical school systems. So it requires dual authentications and passwords expire. So just a little bit more ease of being able to flex between the two systems or the ability to link in from one system. Okay, some of the strengths that we talked about really was in regardings to the reporting capabilities. So the functionality of MedHub itself, it's able to customize a lot of great reports. You can do a 5-year look back. So it's really a great powerhouse of not only capturing data, but also the ability to report out and get the results. So some of the information that Dr. Potts shared earlier today, some of those metrics, those were directly obtained through MedHub. And also Cassie was cited as a great source of knowledge of being our MedHub expert. So really a true wealth of knowledge. The communication. So within the GME office itself, the real strong communication makes it beneficial to program directors. The availability and responsiveness of the DIO. So really being open, always available to answer questions, whether it's early morning, late evening, and that is very important to the program directors. Educational sessions offered by Reed, those have been really beneficial and really viewed as a strength across various programs. The program review meetings that we do, the programs also find those to be very beneficial in assessing the strengths and opportunities for different programs. And then the GME office, as far as email instructions and communications. So really commended for doing a great job with being detailed in their instructions on what needs to be done and the timeliness on when items need to be completed. So some of the opportunities we looked at, again, linking into Cassie's group was in regards to those MedHub evaluations. So I won't spend a lot of time here, but the thought that we came up with is in a process similar to how we review our programs with the program review meetings, do a similar internal audit of our evaluations. Such that when a program fills out their faculty of fellow evaluations or the resident of faculty evaluations, having a process that basically evaluates those evaluations to make sure they're fit for purpose, that it's valuable feedback. So that's one, area that we thought was our key opportunity. Also looking at expanding the Med Hub Mondays, so expanding those out perhaps on days other than just Mondays due to scheduling conflicts, and getting getting a greater involvement in those meetings. Also looked at the standardization of policies. So for example, for learning disabilities, is there a program policy that can be applicable to all programs? Similarly for breastfeeding, is there a policy in place that we know what the actual support would be for that? And then a pathway that would be identified for program directors to know where to go for these policies and the information they need. Also looking at creating an environment where faculty feel protected to share information. So now kind of we're living in a world where information is free flowing, and there's somewhat of a concern or a reluctancy to document information. So, with fear that that could possibly come back in some negative way, or just a way to kind of protect them specifically when it relates to any harassment or any legal issues involved regarding harassment or performance. We also looked at the clinical HR and the medical school HR working together. So there was an issue related to harassment where those two HRs are really working more in a silo. So it was left the learner kind of feeling that wasn't really, their issue wasn't really addressed. The PD had to get involved and act as a conduit to those two organizations. So really a better partnership with both the HRs. And then we also thought, about possibly including a psychological evaluation as part of the learner hiring process. So it's easy to assess the clinical needs of the learner, but not necessarily the psychological needs. So looking at some of our results, really to determine an evaluation process, to look at evaluating the evaluations, that's a mouthful, but really the evaluations that take place, that they're useful, and we need to make sure that they're used in the most appropriate and beneficial way. So some of the suggestions were that taking use of Reed's expertise and using that as an option, a subcommittee that could be comprised of different programs to do that, the CCC as well. We also looked at maybe revisiting that process every couple years, looking at improving the evaluations or modifying them, and then meeting the compliancy of the programs. Another option that we talked about is looking at maybe reformatting the evaluations so that they're globalized for specific areas. So for example, maybe the interpersonal skills are globalized so that every program is receiving the same evaluation, and similarly for practice-based learning or professionalism. And then lastly, looking at a lot of our evaluation tools applied to ACGM accredited programs that have a clinical focus, but maybe looking at evaluations that are more administrative in nature, more non-clinical fellowships, such as like the informatics. So a process for evaluating that. That's anything I missed? No. All right.
Very comprehensive. Thank you, Red Group. Melissa? I think you're next. Sorry, Mike, I'm making you wait.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa McLaughlin in the GME office. I think that we sort of scratched the surface with our group. We were focused on career development and professional development for coordinators. But I'm going to say there's probably no wrong answer or no wrong way to do it. So we'll just kind of run through what we talked about. We had a great conversation. We started out with sort of an aspirational goal, and we only have that one listed because it would be a huge shift and change for us. We talked about centralizing coordinator reporting relationships to come through the GME office as opposed to being decentralized now and having everybody's home within their own programs. This sort of stemmed from the initial part of our discussion of lack of clarity around roles, titles, jobs that sound like they're the same but pay differently, and really having people being challenged by that and not feeling like they're, being treated fairly at times. So trying to solve that problem would be having, everything centralized through the GME office, where we could work to develop milestones, which would be a new process for us, but milestones specifically to coordinators, which would, we thought, help increase accountability and ensure consistent performance reviews with these essential staff to assist with their career advancement, their motivation in their role. And appreciation probably isn't the best word, but maybe more a recognition from the programs for the work that they do. So then we talked a little bit about strengths, about GME in general. Everyone felt the GME was very welcoming, that we are an eager group that listens to problems and really tries to partner and find ways to improve and solve issues that come up. MedHub was cited as a definite strength. It's our core repository and the centralized resource for all of our coordinators to have access to the same information. Coordinators at the table did feel that they were respected by residents and fellows. And we typically as a group understand each other's pain points and are willing to, reach out and support each other. So most of our discussion focused on opportunities related to our aspirational goal. We would like to see more robust orientation programs for coordinators. Currently, we sort of scratch the surface and do what I would say the bare minimum, spending 90 minutes to 2 hours with a new coordinator. And then really depending on those touch bases once they've joined. We're starting to build in 9-month check-ins with our new folks to kind of say, hey, is it going the way you thought? The way we described it to you when you first came, are there things that you didn't think about or would have wished you've known? And we're going to try and support people in that way. And then discussed also developing an onboarding mentor program so that the information doesn't kind of stop the day they're in orientation, that they then have a assigned person that can be a resource for them through email, through phone, in person, to just say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me? And not feeling like they have the pressure of going to their program directors. So building in something like a buddy program. Trying to really be more focused on highlighting the upcoming 3 months of what's coming up for folks at coordinator meetings. We do that, but there was just discussion about being more explicit and in doing that more so that they feel confident about what's ahead. We talked about developing listening sessions in the form of coordinator forums to help problem solve and discover areas of common themes where there might be issues that GME could step in and help with. Back to our aspirational goal of coordinators reporting into GME, we feel like this would be an opportunity to help standardize job titles, salary, role expectations, clarity on advancement opportunities. Like once you're in this fellowship coordinator role, what does your path look like in terms of an associated residency program that you might be able to support? Improve communication with program directors on why titles need to be what they need to be, rather than going out on a limb and creating a different title, which creates an inequity. Give input on performance reviews. Right now, GME doesn't have any ability to really give feedback on how people are doing. And for the most part, the core of their work is based on things that we're asking them to do. And so if they were to centralize and come through GME, we would be able to give that feedback to them and hold them accountable by using like a milestones document and make sure that they're developing in the needed competency areas. We did discuss the idea of a GME float position. This is something that Monique had heard about at a national meeting, and it's something that we have, discussed a little bit, where we would have someone based in the GME office that would be trained by GME and then be able to be deployed when programs have a vacancy. And this would be if somebody decided to leave for a job opportunity, but it could also be for extended leaves of absence. And there was a lot of interest at our table about a possibility for a position like this. So that's something that we would continue to discuss. There's a lot of variation. Certain programs support coordinators to go to annual conferences, society meetings, pay for certain things. We were looking for a better way to try and standardize the monetary support that is given to coordinators for development, and really wanted to help try and support coordinators to be able to attend these types of events as a team to try and help kind of keep everyone together. CTAGME is a certification, and it's a credential that's very valuable in the work that we do. And it's something that, you apply for, you receive the credential, and then you have to maintain it through various presentations and different criteria that they have. And we would like to find a way to try and incentivize that through the university, because we feel like that is something that makes, coordinators work to a higher level, to do things that we find value in. And I think that it also changes the perception of coordinators from being staff to more of like people within leadership roles. And then we also talked about trying to incorporate lean and QI training more at the coordinator level to try and empower them. There's obviously things that are broken in a lot of places, and if coordinators can be part of the solving of those problems, especially in parts of the program where program directors value things running well, that would be really helpful. And then for us, for results, we would like to see, in GME, we work on a cycle. Our typical spiel to new coordinators is it takes at least 2 years, if not 3 years, for you to feel confident in your role. So we were using that 3-year mark as sort of a gauge to say, we would like to be able to retain at least 50% of our coordinators within GME for 3 years. And then that would be the time frame over the next 3 years, sort of measuring that. The likelihood of us losing someone because they haven't felt supported or they're unsure of their role is probably in that 1 to 2 year mark. So if we can get people feeling really confident at 3 years, we're more likely to sort of retain them long term. And we currently survey our folks 1 time a year with various questions, sometimes around onboarding and how things went, how we want to continue our coordinator meetings. And we talked about adding a question about gauging job satisfaction at that time. And we felt like the attendance at these coordinator forums are going to help us identify common themes. And we're hopeful that this 50% number that we were sort of tossing around could be exceeded.
We all know how important our coordinators are. I think we all know how important our coordinators are to our programs. And I think really diving into how we do staff development to keep this retention. So I love that this ended up being the metric that we'll follow for this. Thank you. Our last group is the group I was part of, and I'm going to have Dr. Fahey come up and present for our group. Because you all are sick of listening to me. Then it's split out again, just like
Okay,
everybody else's.
Just advance with keyboard.
Yeah, or this, or whatever.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike Fahey, the program director for the PEDS program here. Our group was talking about program expansion. And our aspirational statement was that our goal is to train the right number of trainees to provide the ideal learning environment for students, residents, and fellows, simultaneously providing consistent and excellent care for patients, and retain these trainees to better serve our local and regional community to work to achieve health equity. And in the overarching scope of this was to also have a transparent and collaborative process for making those decisions for program expansion. We had plenty of strengths that we thought that we could rely on. Central Mass is we're kind of the only show in town, especially we had both pediatrics and med peds representation at our table, so we're very pediatric shifted, but as far as those specialties go, we're kind of the only show in town in Central Mass. And it's a very unique catchment area, us obviously being in a huge urban center, but also being surrounded by a large rural community. We have a growing medical class size, and that's a big opportunity for student retention into our training systems, and then further down the line, retaining those students and then trainees to be faculty here. We obviously have a really huge breadth of clinical experience here for learners to benefit from. As I mentioned before, retaining residents to faculty. I think pediatrics is not the only program here where we have a really good retention rate of keeping our trainees on to stay with us as faculty. And those are folks who inherently understand and appreciate the value of the educational capacity of our programs. We have great collaboration between programs. There's a lot of cross-pollination with our residents going into other programs and vice versa. And we have a great health equity focus at our institution, great interaction with our community and advocacy efforts. So that's another real strength that we can rely on in terms of getting our trainees the proper training. Opportunities. We see program expansion as a big opportunity to improve wellness within our programs, both in terms of mutual support between trainees, but also showing that the broader institution is making investments in their training and making investments that they care about resident wellness, and I should say trainee wellness, residents and fellows. Saving recruitment costs for faculty. Everybody knows that it costs a massive amount of money to when you have faculty turnover. So the better job we can do of retaining residents who have perhaps a better chance of remaining faculty here in the long term, that could actually save the institution dollars. There's obviously a big collaboration already between programs and between the clinical system and the medical school. And with expanding medical school class numbers and everything, that's going to remain an ongoing opportunity for us. An opportunity to improve patient outcomes. We talked a lot about having more trainees, not necessarily not necessarily strictly for service issues, but that having more trainees improves the overall clinical infrastructure and educational infrastructure, which is going to lead to better patient outcomes. Also, that can help to improve access and care for our underserved communities. We happen to have this reputation as the #1 teaching medical center in New England for primary care. And we would like to keep that reputation by training up more primary care oriented trainees. As I kind of alluded to before, improving that learning environment for the expanding medical school class, but also for trainees in a kind of peer-to-peer way. So again, the more trainees that you have in a clinical space, not necessarily there in a service role, but they're providing some service that then distributes that service burden so that the educational objectives of the training can actually take place. You can't do a lot of good education when you're running around just taking care of patients all day. There's that experiential learning, which is great, but something is lost in that too. So we thought that there was benefit in having an expanded trainee pool to support that educational environment. And then we also thought that there was an opportunity to improve the process by which program expansion happens. Specifically, we need to allow transparency with how that process takes place, closing the loop. For example, if a program applies for program expansion and they're not awarded that expansion, well, why was that? What was missing from that application, and what are the things that they can do to realign the goals with what we're looking for as an institution? Our results, we talked about creating a subcommittee within GMEC and consider to basically specifically consider expansions and funding for those expansions. First, we would have to send out a survey with which programs would want to expand. We also said low-hanging fruit would be if anybody happens to feel like they have too many slots, maybe that would be low-hanging fruit that we could use to expand other programs. And we need to create a sensitive timeline with the idea of kind of a rapid assessment of who needs to expand and then seeking that approval by, say, March, April, so that it's ready in place for upcoming budget season. And we cheated a little bit because we had Stacy on our team. So we put our stuff right into the Smarty metric. And so we're going to aim to develop a transparent and consistent process for consideration of program development and expansion. We would like to achieve that strategic approach to serve the clinical system and community needs for our aspiration. Have decisions made about program expansion by March 2024. The GMEC subcommittee would be a 3-year rolling membership, perhaps 2 to 3 program directors, resident representation, 2 to 3 coordinators, CMO, DIO, and OGME. And we also talked about kind of maybe having overlapping terms so that it wouldn't be just everybody shows up and then after 3 years they disappear, but to have kind of a rolling process so that there's some institutional knowledge that kind of carries over year to year. We thought that this was a goal worth working hard to accomplish. And then we would aim to include a diverse group of volunteers to the subcommittee. Oh, and I just mentioned this with the rolling membership to promote inclusion. And we would seek to build a fair and equitable process through transparency and open application committee process, which included that kind of feedback for programs who, for example, don't get their program expansion, what could have improved that application to maybe allow them to seek it in future years. Happy to field any questions.
You know, we have about 10 minutes to kind of mull over all of this. I know you had cookies. Any thoughts about what we heard? There's a lot of great work to be done still, but some great ideas here. Let me ask you guys this. If you could prioritize, I could send out a survey like this, but if we were to prioritize 3 areas that we just heard about, what would be the areas that you would prioritize? Why don't you figure that out at each of your tables? And I'll give you 2 minutes to kind of discuss at your tables and then think about, I know you just heard it, you don't have it in front of you, but what things stood out to you that you think would be worth for us to prioritize? Okay, so I know that was a quick discussion, but let's come back and I'll ask my question again. What do you think should be the priorities going forward? Orange.
That's a lot of time that you're not.
Talking about the role of the coordinator and how we need maybe a more intensive orientation. So rather than taking 2 years to maybe get up to speed, hopefully in 3 months, there could be a more intensive program. And again, it's probably a staffing issue.
Well, the other challenge is that those 3 months are different than the other 9 months of the year. So that's why it kind of takes a year to get through once. And then the second time you're a little bit better. How about you guys? What did you guys prioritize?
Evaluations and also the coordinator.
This is not a grade on how your small group did, but I can see this is competitive here. What did you guys?
In addition to the QI stuff, but we did program coordinator. I think we do need, definitely. It's a universal program issue. All the programs have the same thing. And the other thing we prioritized was the faculty development for evaluations, which is also a universal program issue.
And of course, QI. You guys?
The coordinators too.
Vote for yourself.
Because we think coordinators are the basics. You need them and you need to make them happy in order for the program to keep growing. So I think we should start with that.
It really is incredible how the stability of the coordinator really changes the feeling in the rest.
So, yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. All across the country, turnover among program coordinators is a problem. And part of that is pay, salary. I was just saying that, there was a suggestion about standardizing the pay. I actually encountered a problem with that when we were trying to hire because we were limited by HR in what we could pay. So I think we could make some progress there.
Yeah, and again, thinking about incentivizing things like the Tag Me and the incentive of being able to go to conferences and present. And yeah, there's a lot of development opportunities there and figuring out the right incentives for the work that's done.
We didn't talk about it much more than that.
All right, you got the work done. How about you guys?
So we thought our top three were DEI, the coordinators, and program expansion.
All right, so thank you. I think that really helps. It sounds like coordinator. Definitely is an area that we can spend some time on. So I have one more slide here and one more activity for you guys to do. So I want to again thank you all for the incredible work that you've done. And before you run off today, I want to express my deep gratitude for everything that you've done. But I also want to honor the fact that your small groups did an incredible amount of work together. So what I'd like you to do is in the center of your table are some cards that you've used for different things throughout the day, I know, but now they're going to be thank you cards. And there's some stickers if you want to decorate your cards, but please write thank you notes, specific, timely, to your colleagues at your small table. So each of you should walk away with 4 or 5 thank you notes. And for the bigger tables, if you want to divide and conquer, or if you want to write 7 thank you notes, that's up to you. But go ahead, dig in.